Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Psychiatry Unboxed. We're going to be doing a fun episode a little bit today. We're going to be talking about Taylor Swift, parasocial relationships, and have the first time we're doing a three-way kind of podcast. So we have Dr. Jessi Gold, who's been on the show before, and Britt Barkholtz, who is new to the show, but proved to be a very fun addition. So we'll skip all the long bios and then we'll just kind of jump right in, but welcome to the latest episode.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We've got a fun and exciting show today. It's extremely serious, but it's also fun and exciting. The first time we're doing a three-way call, so this is going to be different. So hopefully we don't break the internet in some way, shape, or form. But we're going to be talking about Taylor Swift, parasocial relationships, and mental health. And I have the two biggest Taylor fans in the mental health sphere say we were going to give a giant FU to the New York Times on that craptastic article that they put out there. So Dr. Jessi Gold and Miss Britt Barkholtz. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself first, and then we'll kind of go from there. Ms. Britt, you can go first.
Make me go first.
Yeah, Britt, you get to go first.
We're doing this alphabetically. Okay.
Yeah. Letters, yes.
So I'm Britt Barkholtz. I am, as promised, one of the biggest Swifties in the mental health sphere, I think. I am a trauma therapist in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. My clinical specialties focus primarily around complex trauma and specifically also domestic and sexual violence. Other than my Swiftiness, kind of the main bullet points about me are that I read a lot, I run a lot, and I own way too much Taylor Swift merchandise. So. Oh,
that's okay. You can never have too much of like that. So like I have like 100 plus pairs of sneakers, and if somebody were to say I have too many, I'd be very upset with them. So
the correct answer to that is too many for what?
Too many
and then
for
watch
what?
them struggle. Because they won't know what to say.
There we go. There's a therapist hack for life, right? When people start to get at you. All right. And then we have Dr. Jessi Gold. So Jessi Gold has been on the show before, so we'll let you do your thing again, so it's okay.
Okay, no problem. Shout out to her cardigan, which is Taylor Swift merch. I am a psychiatrist in St. Louis who specializes in kind of college mental health, healthcare worker mental health. I see patients as an outpatient, and then I also do a lot of admin related to healthcare worker mental health and leadership in our hospital. I write sometimes to explain the reason why this even kind of started. I mean, that article came out and my therapist sent it to me and said, I thought you wrote this. And then I realized you didn't. So that just kind of explains my life in a very good way, which is that I talk about it enough that even my therapist would be like, why are you not the psychiatrist writing about Taylor Swift in the New York Times?
Yeah.
Both Britt and I have been Taylor Swift fans. I think they call us elder fans or something. I think there's a word for that, which is that we actually saw her perform debut. It's old stuff and open for people before she was cool. We stuck with her when people didn't like her. And I think have been around for a while. So it's kind of cool that people talk about Taylor Swift in this really different way now, where I think both of us have, been through periods where we maybe weren't necessarily in a group of people wearing merch.
Yeah.
Yes. Raise your hand if you've ever been made fun of, genuinely for your adoration of Taylor Swift.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because I'll admit right from the beginning, I'm not the biggest Taylor Swift fan. More so in regards to it's not my genre of music. I'm more of an old school hip hop, 90s New York hip hop guy, and the Euro trash dance music that we use for when I'm working out at the gym. That's my main thing. But my son was when we were when he was a kiddo, when he was like, 6, 7, 8 months old, Shake It Off was like really big, and that was like, I was like, and then there was, now my kids are a little bit older and they're like requesting songs for me to put on the drive-in. And I was like, oh wait, this is Taylor Swift. I didn't even realize like, oh, this is Taylor Swift. I didn't even realize it. And I was like, oh, this is like some good stuff. So we'll start with that one, but let's start with our surprise question. So I do a surprise question for everybody. So Jessi, you can go first this time.
Okay.
Favorite Taylor Swift song and why?
I kind of thought that was going to be your surprise question, to be honest.
Yeah, that's okay.
So the problem with that is she has a very big catalog. It's enormous, actually.
Yeah.
So like picking one song forever is pretty hard. I will say she just released Speak Now, Taylor's version. So I've been deep in listening to that. So if we're going to just pick a song that I am currently actively listening to the most.
We can go with that, yeah.
I like the I Can See You song from The Vault. And I also like Last Kiss on that album. But all-time favorite, maybe I would say All Too Well 10-minute version. But that's probably like a wimpy answer. Champagne Problems, probably also up there too.
Okay. Britt, you can go now. Same question. Favorite-ish song.
Like similar disclaimer that, it's such a big... My thing is, like, I feel like my favorite song entirely depends on what mood I'm in a moment, and both, like, emotionally and musically, because you can just have such a wide range with that. My easy answer, I feel like I do, similar to Jessi, I always default to All Too Well, just because it is a deep favorite of mine. But I also, like, as the youth call it, my stan song is State of Grace. That is my like deep cut that I feel like not enough people give respect to. And as far as the recent release of Speak Now, Taylor's version, the song that I can't stop listening to on that one is Foolish One from The Vault. That has been on a large repeat.
Nice.
If you would need us to explain things to you, like what From the Vault and Taylor's version means, feel free to ask.
Have to. Yeah.
So Taylor Swift had her masters like sold without being offered to her. And so as a result, she's re-recording all the albums she does not currently own. Anything called something Taylor's version is her re-recording version of it. When we say From the Vault, it's like she basically decided that she would also add songs to those albums so that like if you're buying a new album, you also get some new experience from it. And they're songs she wrote at the time of that album. So she's like picking up from her huge, like sort of, if you went back to your journals from when you were 17 and then re-recorded and then recorded something there, or like if there was a song that her label didn't put on the album because her label didn't like it, she put those on. So those are all the ones that are like from the vault. It's interesting because Britt said like All Too Well is like a classic one. It used to be my like song that nobody else talked about that I really liked. And then she re-recorded it and she did the 10-minute version and did a video and all this stuff. And all of a sudden it's like on SNL and it's like all over the place. And so it's almost like a lame answer now, when it used to be like when we were younger, like it was a really sad song on that album. And it said a lot about you emotionally to be like, that's my favorite song on that album. But now it's like kind of trendy. So it went from being like a secret stan to being like everybody's favorite song, which is a little weird, but true.
No, it used to be considered a deep cut. And now it's like the most common song that people say for a favorite, I feel like.
Yeah, no, it's like you have that ability. I think it's really cool that she's doing that. First of all, just because like you have this years now of fame and then just being able to reflect and then kind of rework it. And then you have all those extra stuff that goes on and how it shows up differently now. So
her voice sounds different too, which is cool, right? Like if you're 17 and like 31 or whatever, it's a very big difference. And so I think that's pretty cool too, as like a person who listened the whole time and, she looks back and reflects on lyrics and changes them if they don't make sense or, things like that, which I think is pretty cool too.
I was going to say, Britt, I know you're doing a lot of like trauma work. Is there some kind of analogy that we can draw in there for redoing these songs and reshaping things?
I don't want to like scoop myself because I'm working on writing a piece about this actually.
Okay.
But I my like so this will like I will also save everybody from like the 10-minute answer to that.
Sure.
Like my short answer to that is that there is absolutely something to be said for going back and reflecting on and processing past experiences in a way that allows you to reclaim the narrative. Because that's so much of trauma work, is going back and looking at, hey, I can't change what happened, and I can't, I can't fix what happened. I can't change how it impacted me, but I can maybe try to kind of integrate that experience, past and present, into who I am now and how I move forward with that, and what narrative I carry with me. And I think that is a thing that I totally see showing up in threads throughout how she has approached this re-recording process, for sure.
It's sort of like a triple trauma there, right? So there's like the trauma of like her losing her albums that she's reclaiming, and then there's the trauma of those experiences she wrote about, which is, so it's got like multiple layers. And then I also think if you think of songs like journaling, or you think of songs like your actual story, it is very much like trauma therapy, right? Like where you might have someone actually write their story until they don't have as many emotional reactions, or until they reclaim it, whatever that looks like for them. And so if you think of each song as sort of like a chapter, or an experience within it, that's also pretty cool.
So I think that's super, super cool. Like, so let's do this. Let's shit on the New York Times for a little bit. Let's go back to
okay, disclaimer, no offense to that psychiatrist, I don't know her. She
seems
like
person.
A really lovely person. Like, I just
guy.
want to say, like, let me just put that out there, because I don't want like somebody to be like, that's my friend and you're being mean, Jessi. Because like psychiatry is a small world. Like, I'm not trying to do that. I was surprised that a piece like that got in the New York Times, because I write a lot and I would have never even thought to pitch a piece like that. And I would always think about a piece like that. So that was surprising to me, which maybe started my feelings about the piece, which have nothing to do with her, right? It's really not about her.
I was surprised too, like when I read it, because I was like, what is this? And I think like we had messaged, I think you and I had messaged her, and I'd written like a short story in like grade school where I loved like the NBA, and I used all the NBA titles, all the NBA team titles, like in the body of like this paper I wrote, this short story I wrote. It was very juvenile. And that's what the article was, right? Is just that she used all the Taylor Swift songs as like sentences or words to make up the whole article, quote unquote article. And I was just like, man, there's so much that could be done with this topic. So let's do it in a podcast, right?
Her, like, as far as mediums go, there is so much more to say that this probably is the easier way to do it than to try to write a piece like that.
And to be fair to her, they're probably going on SEO keywords things and and added some of that in, like I don't know how much of that would be a person's choice versus like, hey, what about putting some puns in here? People like a pun, not a million puns, but it seems to be like a thing, like headlines and news people, like when Taylor's coming to town, are like, let me write a whole news thing where I use 75 like shout outs to different songs. Like, it's weird, all the government has been doing that too, like welcome to our town, whoever, and here's this like weird attempt written by the intern to use every song possible. So it's also just,
town was labeled as Swifties for a whole weekend, like, because that rolls off the tongue so well.
Oh my God. Alliteration. We need this. Let's talk about this. So I know, Britt, I think you do a lot of work with music itself too.
I do. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, and then let's go into how we incorporate that into like the mental health world.
Yeah. So
very broad.
That's fair. Yeah. My initial disclaimer is just to say that I am not a music therapist. So people who are not in the therapy world may not know this, but like music therapist is its own title. It's its own license. It's its own degree. Like, and music therapists are amazing, amazing people. So I always just want to make sure that I am not stepping on toes and misrepresenting myself.
Yeah.
But my bachelor's degree is in music. And so I, as someone with degrees in music and social work, my therapy degree, I find that the combining of those two things works really well for me personally. And I have found that it is also really helpful for a lot of the clients that I work with. So one of the things, and I think this is probably much more universal than just trauma clients, but that's the population that I work with. And a thing that a lot of trauma survivors struggle with is articulating emotion and accessing emotions in safe and helpful ways, right? Like everything from either, I can't even access my emotions, can't feel it, or I can feel it, but I don't know how to articulate it, or I know how I would articulate it, but it doesn't feel safe to, and I don't want to, and I don't feel comfortable. Like there's just, we talk about, feel your feelings, talk about how you feel. And those seem like really basic things, but they are super not. And so I have found music to be a really, really helpful vehicle for facilitating that conversation. Anything from, if you're trying to name a feeling and maybe can't get to it, but you can say like, but this song is resonating with me right now, or this lyric describes how I'm feeling about this thing, or even just like on a personal like processing level, right? Like we've all done the thing where you're listening to a song and just letting yourself feel all the things because of that song. And maybe that feels a little bit more safe than just sitting with those feelings that you have. I mean, just letting it exist in the world, right? Like maybe channeling it through something like music, which is, designed to create an emotional experience. Maybe that feels safer. Maybe that helps you get deeper in it. And music is a global process. So like, get like too nerdy, but
that's okay.
Music activates both hemispheres of your brain. Which is similar to how, like, if you think about in like EMDR therapy, what is the whole thing underlying EMDR? Bilateral stimulation, both sides of the brain, right? Like this is how we process things. And so music allows us to more deeply process and feel those feelings that we may struggle to access. That's why you've got folks in like late stage dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, who can't identify the people around them, can't remember people's names or things that happened to them, but they can sit down at a piano and play that piece that they played for an 8th grade recital, right? Like it hits us on some of our absolute deepest like levels. And I think that that's an extremely powerful tool to use in a therapy context.
Yeah. Jessi, do you have particular songs in your life that you can remember that are like tied to memories and moments? I know it's, again, very big and broad, but like, because there's it hits on emotions. Like I'll give you a little time to think. But like, I remember like after I had like failed out of dental school, right? One of these great tragedies of my life, right? And I'm like at home and sitting at home and being like, what do I do with my life? And I'm commuting to like this, to get this master's degree so that I don't have to start paying back my loans immediately. And I'm going back in there. There was this album that came out by the Last Shadow Puppets. And I don't know if probably people don't know them. But it was basically the head guy from Arctic Monkeys and another band. And they put out this album. It was a very retro-y kind of rock album. But I remember it being like the soundtrack of that year because it hit me on a different level and it helped me get through like this rough time of my life, right? And, recently I went to a Block Party concert, so another British band. And again, they were part of that like year of my life where I was like struggling and like really low and like I failed and blah, blah, blah. But like the music helped get me through that stuff, right? That emotions there. So anytime like a song comes on from them, I'm like, it transports me to there, but then remembers like the strength of what the music did for me because it gave me like a direction to something else. So Jessi, I hope we give you a little time there.
Yeah, I mean, so this is gonna date me for your TikTok fans, but I think of music. There's this thing in the show called Ally McBeal, which
Oh
is a
yeah.
show where there's a lawyer and she has a lot of anxiety and she sees a therapist and her therapist tells her to pick a theme song. And whenever she's feeling super anxious or super sad or whatever, to go to that theme song for support. Sorry. The theme song is not my dog barking, but my
Yeah.
dog would like to be part of this conversation.
Sure. The more the
Winnie.
merrier.
Sorry. So anyways, so now that I dated myself for your TikTok fans, because that's a 90s show,
Yeah.
I think of music that way. My theme song is the Lily Allen Fuck You song. And that's always been very helpful for me. So like it, you know, if I'm feeling angry or sad or something, it can pull me out of it. I have a whole playlist that's called Call, which I used when I was on call, and it is a mix of emotions. So if I just want to go to sleep, there's like sad, like kind of slow songs, but there's also a lot of like wake up, you're angry, you hate this songs. So that exists, but I would say go to being the Fuck You Lily Allen song.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I mean, I'm sure that there are also obviously Taylor Swift songs for different times and places and things, but if I told you all of those, it also might give away my mental health history, so I'm not going to do that.
We'll do just a little bit. So like, yeah, no, my favorite song in that vibe is like, you know, the Nas "Hate Me Now" song. So whenever I'm like, you know, feeling me against the world, it's like, you know, put on "Hate Me Now" and go from there. So, all right, let's talk about Taylor a bit. Let's also talk about parasocial relationships, and then we'll get there. Jessi, do you want to talk about parasocial relationships a little bit?
Do I?
Do you?
I mean, so parasocial relationship
that
is like
mean?
you don't know the person, but you think you know the person because of
Yeah.
like all of the stuff they put out and all of the content. So in social media, there's a lot of that because people are sharing so much of themselves on social that you think you know them. Reality shows are really big for this too, right? Like those are people in their lives. And so you feel like you know them as people and they're almost like your friends. And so it comes up in conversation about Taylor because she's very good at cultivating a fan base and very good at marketing and has always been. And as a result, people feel like they know her and her life and her experiences very well. She also plays into that and like puts clues and like tries to get people to find the clues. And so like people spend a lot of time looking at her like appearances and her like song notes and her posts and whatever for these clues. And like that also makes people feel close to her. I think her mom and dad go to every concert. I can't name another person's mom and dad that is a musician that I've ever listened to, but I could tell you both of their names. I could tell you her like publicist's name because it's sort of like this family. Her friends, I can almost name her whole friend group probably too. And I think in during the 1989 era, she made a lot of those people famous because they were like around her. And so like there's just this way that she is in the world very particularly and very so like on purpose that makes people feel like they know her as a human, not as a distant famous person I'm never going to meet, right?
Yeah. Britt, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think Jessi summed it up really well. I think that it is one of those things that's hard, and I think this applies in a lot of ways around like social media stuff as far as the like perceived amount of closeness, but like where this can get into some trouble, right? Like it's all fun and games when we're like decoding Taylor's like lyrics or she's like leaving outfit like clues and Easter eggs for things. But I think that like perceived degree of closeness can become a problem then when it's, you know, applied in ways where it's like, oh, now you're forgetting that like this all-encompassing image that you have of someone that makes you think that you know them very well is still a highly curated image. Like you are still being shown the pieces that someone is okay with you seeing and is presenting in a certain way. Like that does not mean that you should, you know, stalk Taylor Swift and climb into her window to try to get to meet her. Like that, I mean, I would hope that nobody would do that to any of us, but like, you know,
it happens.
Yeah. It happens.
So it brings into boundary things that happen all the time. And like okay, my disclaimer on this is I am by no means comparing myself to any level of celebrity, let alone Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But like I've noticed it even just on Twitter, where like I'll have people DM me some like really intense personal stuff,
Yep.
just like out of nowhere, and I'm like, whoa, like. Setting aside any feelings that I have about anything that's going on for anybody, and of course I have tons of empathy for that, it is this thing where I'm like, it just feels very odd to me that this person who I don't actually know their real name, have probably never interacted with or very rarely interacted with, other than maybe like a couple of Twitter replies back and forth, then is like sharing some like really personal stuff with me that to me is the level that like I might only be sharing with some pretty close friends. And so it can catch you off guard when there's different perceived boundaries around that sort of thing in that parasocial dynamic.
Yeah. Jessi, it sounded like you wanted to say something or no?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think about this sometimes with like big TikTok creators. So with someone like Elyse Myers, I think every single person would be like, I know who she is. She's my friend. She's a little quirky. She's really fun. I like her. You know, she's pregnant. This is what she's going through, right? And probably to a degree, a lot of that is true because she's pretty honest and open in the way that she is. And like the same with me. If you were like to meet me in human form, I'm very similar to the way that I am online. But that doesn't mean we're friends, right? So I think it's like you might actually know me more than some people might know me because I have been open and I have been sharing and whatever. But it doesn't mean that like now all of a sudden you don't have to introduce yourself to me or we wouldn't have to become friends, right? Like it's almost like the presumed relationship skips all those steps. And so it can be like dangerous in that way. I think like the way that people have interacted with famous people and assumed like they can take pictures or they can be around them or they would want to hang out with them or they, you know, those kind of things is seriously because of like this, like we're already there. So like, I just need to meet them and then we'd be all the way there. You know, it's like that feeling and it's probably nothing like that at all. And I think it's dangerous. I also think for Taylor, this comes up around her interpersonal relationships a lot. Like who she's dating, who she used to date, etc. And like people defend her on things that happened a really long time ago, or people really judge her for like being around a person post breakup that like wasn't great, but like she's young enough that she can still do what, you know, like you can't dictate her life, you know? So I think there were a lot, that's an interesting discourse that comes from that, which is like, because you think you're friends with the person, you can comment on their relationship when, you know, honestly, I wouldn't want my friends doing that. Like, I might want my friends like in public to sidebar me and be like, hey, have you seen all this stuff that this guy said? I don't think he's a very nice guy. Like, maybe you should think about that. I know you're just having fun, but like, can we talk about that a little? Like, I would want that from a friend, but I wouldn't want like a public outcry about who I'm choosing to like be around. Like, that must just feel really uncomfortable. And it's sad to me a little bit that it gets to that because like, I don't know. I mean, I get it and I know why it does, but I also am like, I wish it didn't because it's kind of sad.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, if you're having like a few of your friends saying some stuff about, for example, if you're like dating somebody or spending some time with somebody, it's like a handful of people, right? But when somebody like Taylor Swift or any celebrity is like millions of people, right? Tens of millions of people that are commenting. And again, the internet has like, again, democratized people's voices to the point that they can say whatever they want to say behind their keyboards or whatever it is. And then without repercussion, right? Because you're going to say that to somebody's face? Of course not, right? Most of the stuff that people will say online, they would never have the ability to say that in person. And so people...
If you're a real Taylor Swift fan too, you would also realize that the internet was weaponized against her and that's why she disappeared for like 2 years. And so I think that like it's very ironic sometimes that like it kind of people can't stop themselves even though and to like fall into those same patterns. It's all probably psychologic in some capacity. That makes sense, right? But like, you know, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, there was this whole thing with Kim Kardashian and like a leaked tape and Kanye West and everybody called her a snake. Go watch Miss Americana on Netflix if you want to learn more. It's like an awesome documentary and will teach you a lot about some of the like kind of more personal side of Taylor Swift, but also like some of this stuff in good well done documentary.
Yeah.
But you know, like the internet turned against, like Taylor Swift is over was trending, right? And like that's a lot. And
That's a
every
lot.
magazine was like, are we done with her? We're done with her.
Yeah.
You know, so like if you actually saw that and how much that hurt, obviously, because she didn't come back, like you literally disappeared for 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think you would maybe stop for a second before doing some of that stuff. But I think it's just like once someone starts, everybody starts, and there's a lot of groupthink around it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't know. Social media does give you like the ability to do what you're saying, sort of like, I don't know them, but like whatever. Or I think I know them, so I can say whatever.
Yeah. Or they'll never see this, so I can say whatever I want to say because who am I to say these things? But then that stuff comes up, right? And people will like, inflate, etc., and go from there. So it's trouble. And I see this right with other parts of anything, a celebrity in general. Like again, like I was gonna say, like I'm a big wrestling fan, and you know, women's wrestling has like grown a lot in the past 10 plus years, and it's good for all the reasons that it should. But of course, you have the people who fit the wrestling stereotypes of like the people who live in their mom's basement who are never going to do anything, the guys, right, who don't shower, and then they form these relationships, again, the parasocial relationships with these women wrestlers, and they're like, oh my God, like how come they're dating so and so? How come they got married to so and so, and he's so ugly, and how could that happen? And like I'm offended, and like you know, again, you see all the terrible side of like wrestling Twitter. I'm on there when something like this shows up, and again, wrestling is its own niche, but we know that same thing happens with like Taylor and etc.
It has like a closeness to not as far, but like erotomanic delusions, right?
Yeah.
So like this
Yeah.
belief that like you're dating the person, right? Which can lead to stalking and has in the past. Like
Yeah.
Jodie Foster's a good example. Probably question mark. There's some John Lennon maybe as an example, right? There's like some of these people that have had big things happen to them.
Yeah.
There are examples of this, and it's like bordering on that for some people, especially when it starts to cross the line where you're like, is there reality in here? Like, can you find it? And if you can't, then I think you are in that space where you're really close to what we in our field would call erotomanic delusions.
Yeah. So it's like all I need to do is just meet with them, and then next thing you know, we'll have a whole life together, right?
Mm-hmm. We'll be best friends, or we'll be in love, or you know, we already are.
Yeah.
Every time they wave, they're waving at me.
Yeah. Britt, anything that you wanted to add to that, or it sounded like you were saying something, or?
No, I mean, I think that sums it up pretty well. I think it's, part of that. That pattern of filling in blanks, I think, where people don't necessarily realize that they're filling in blanks. Like, of course, we all do that, but you have to be aware that you're doing it. So again, when you see the image of whether it's Taylor or Jessi Gold or whoever you may be seeing their like presence that they put out to the world, right? Like, yes, you do. You feel like you know these, you know people based on those things, but there are also a lot of like blanks or things that you don't know. And if you're filling them in your head of just like in my mind, this is how, they are in these areas of their life that I don't know. That's one thing, but it's another thing to not realize that you're filling in that blank and to feel like you do genuinely know their whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reality check part's important, right? Like both Britt and I are big fans, but we also know we're not friends with her. And like we also know that like we might tag her sometimes just in hopes that she ever sees it, but we don't actually think she will. Or like I've written pieces on her and I hope that she'll see them, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna like do something weird to make sure that she does, and it doesn't mean I assume that she does, right? So I think that you can be a big fan and have a reality component to it, right? Like you can say, I like Taylor Swift. I've seen her every tour. I'm going to buy every album, whatever. And we are not friends. And, and I think that part's important. And I think anytime you see like Britt tweet about Taylor, you'd see that she's like, I'm back to my stuff again, just so you know. Like, we know we are going to do that and it's annoying. And we know that like, sometimes there's a degree of fandom that bothers other people, right? And like knowing that is part of like a psychological awareness that not everybody has when they get to that level, which is to say like, this might annoy people, or this could be a pain. And so if that's who you are, like, just know this is coming and don't get mad at me for it, or, you know, whatever. And I don't think that a lot of the people in the sort of like grossly parasocial kind of network of this, like, have that. Like, it wouldn't make sense to them why, like, her mom wouldn't pick them or stop and give them a hug or a bracelet or whatever at a concert, because of course she knows me. I talk about her all the time, right? But no, that's not how it works, right? So I think like the degree of reality check is super important. And I think if you're a big fan, like, you can be a big fan. Like, none of it, like, I would never tell you you couldn't. Like, I think having somebody to look up to, having somebody that you relate to, or that's lyrics can give you emotional like context when you don't have it, like Britt was saying, like, that's really important. But in the same respect, like, being able to go like, but she's famous is really important. And I think that part, you can see that missing in a lot of people, and you can see it missing a lot on TikTok. And it's unfortunate, because I think I don't want people to feel like they can't be fans because it's unhealthy, because you can. It's just that you need to have other things too. And you also need to have like some reality check about it.
Yeah.
I think also within that too, like within the reality check, also the like the expectations game. Like I hate using this word because I feel like people use this in ways that I don't love often, but I feel like there is often this sense of entitlement to XYZ thing around people when there are parasocial relationships. Like I have seen there's been a lot of like ongoing discourse around the crowds that form outside of Taylor's recording studio when she's going in and out. And some people are like very much like, yeah, well, she has no reason to be upset about us for being there. Like that, we are entitled to, she's a celebrity. It's a public street, blah, blah, blah. And then other people are like, I mean, yeah, she's a celebrity. Yes, it's a public street, but like, this is not a press appearance. She's like actively trying to cover her face. She's just going in to record something. Like, this is a different thing, but people feel really entitled to the like space and place with those types of relationships that it gets into some murky waters if you aren't actually reality testing. Like, again, yeah, what is the difference between I'm going to this event that Taylor is hosting to meet fans versus I'm showing up to wait for 12 hours to see her for 2 seconds outside of the studio?
Yeah. I think that like entitlement piece is really interesting because, you know, from the person's point of view, right? Like I've spent hundreds of dollars on these tickets, right? I've, you know, bought the merch, right? I'm wearing the clothes. I've told my friends about them. I've liked their tweets and their Instagrams, and I've posted their stuff. And the least that they can do is give me a hug, right? And give me a high five and talk with me, right? That's what they owe me, right? Is that part of the mentality that shows up there too? You think? Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, I think
like,
so.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I don't feel like I personally am in that camp, so it's hard for me to like say what other people are thinking. But I get that vibe, that there's a thing of like, oh, yeah, we support her in these ways. We buy all of her stuff. We pay to go to the concert. We defend her online, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so therefore, she owes X amount of fan service or whatever. And you know, the initial premise of it is not incorrect in the sense that I do think that, like, you know, you should treat your fans well if they are the people that made you, you know, that like support you and blah, blah, like, sure, yeah. But I feel like people take that to a really far extreme sometimes. That's like, this is not, we're talking about different things now.
Yeah, the tickets are so expensive too. I mean, it's so complicated. Like, you are giving up a lot to be a fan, and I get that.
Yep.
So it's really complicated. But I think that that's always been the case when there have been celebrities. The distance and I think just maybe the social distance has changed with social media, where like you wouldn't hear from the Beatles until they were around for a concert, so you didn't really have to think about it much, and it was a lot then because people were like, ooh, we see them, right? And so that was a big deal. And there weren't as many TV stations and there weren't as many interviews and there, so I don't know. I mean, I think we've probably made it exponentially worse with like this degree of like everything.
Access,
with access. And maybe it's interesting because like, maybe because Britt and I started being fans when like the access was less. That makes a difference. Like, like you could buy a CD and they had line notes and, she would do like little things for fans, like surprise them on Christmas with something or whatever. But like, it was very different than this like enormous thing with like access on social and access on all of these ways. And so I wonder if like we're able to reality check more because it's not our experience of exposure to people. I don't know. I can't completely say that. It could just be like my personality is not one to assume that something is owed to me. But I do think that like there is a different experience being like in Gen Z and et cetera, where like your access has been at your fingertips all the time for people. And that's really different than not having the internet.
I mean, for us oldies.
I mean, I'm not even that old, right? Like, but
this is really coming in hot here. Like us senior Swifties were like, remember when you just bought the CD and then like eventually got onto MySpace and that was it? Like that was a big deal, man.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me seem old, but I do think that like, I'm not that old, but people forget that all this internet stuff and social media stuff is really new. And that's really changed our access to people. And reality TV is really new. I mean, like the Osbournes was like, when was that? That wasn't, I mean, so
late 90s, right?
Late 90s. So like all of these like sort of pseudo reality things are recent. And so like, I think if you're 13, 14, 15, 16, like that's all I think. And that must be really different, I think. Like they might need help reality checking because they might not know to.
Because their reality is different, right? Reality is different from ours. So let's talk about, Britt, I'll let you take the lead on this one. Taylor, why so many people identify on a mental health point of view with Taylor's lyrics and songs and everything like that? What's special about her? More special about her?
Another one that I'm like, oh, okay, how do I not give like a 20-minute answer?
In this thesis, I will.
So I think that, like Taylor's whole, like brand is around diaristic songwriting. That has been her thing since day one, is that my songs are like, I'm writing my own songs and I'm writing them about my life, and not just about my life, but in a like very explicitly personal way. Like a lot of songwriters write about their lives, but a lot of them also write things in much more kind of like ambiguous or interpretive ways, or lean more into metaphor, or, things like that. Whereas like her song lyrics make it, in most cases, very explicit what she's feeling, what's going on. And I think that is a like hugely powerful thing for people, in the sense of like feeling like they have, like that their feelings and thoughts and all these things matter too. Like, I mean, the Swiftie community as a whole is very varied, right? Like everybody from like all ages, all genders, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like in particular, young girls get told from a very early age, both implicitly and explicitly, that they're, it's the, dramatic teenage girls. Oh, like, what is the first thing that we do when, like, culturally, when people are mocking something? Oh, that's, that's a movie for teenage girls. That's Taylor Swift's audience is all teenage girls. Like Taylor Swift just sounds like a teenage girl. And it's like, okay, so what I'm hearing is that you think that the biggest insult in the world is to be a teenage girl. And there's so much messaging around that being bad, and that, young girls' feelings and thoughts are too much, and that they should tuck those away, and that their experiences are whatever. And I think that Taylor has, throughout her career, kind of helped a lot of people, and again, in particular, those young girls see that, like, hey, my thoughts and feelings matter, and maybe I'm not going to share a super revealing personal diaristic song with the world, but maybe I do feel like it's okay for me to tell someone how I'm feeling about something. Maybe it's okay for me to have these big feelings and to be able to seek some kind of community around them. Maybe this is something that isn't just something I should minimize and roll my eyes at and dismiss. Maybe this is actually important. It matters. My experiences matter. And I can do what I want to do with that. I think, to me, that's a really important piece of what C has done within her general ethos.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're also told like we're being dramatic, right? Or like that the girl side of the breakup isn't, you're like, you need to get over it. Like, why do you still care? And I do think like a lot of that is feedback she gets publicly too. And you see like the way that hits and like her response, and that also helps. But her music like has always been like, well, I'm allowed to talk about the relationship too. Like that was my relationship too. Or what do you mean dramatic? Like call me dramatic, I'll deal with it kind of thing. And that's really nice. And then I think as she's evolved too, like if you look at the albums she put out over COVID, there's a lot more reference explicitly to mental health than she maybe did before. Some of that started again, if I like in that Miss Americana documentary. And she talks more about sort of the price of fame for her and eating disorders and depression, and like the wording in some of her later songs like actually includes like words like depression. And so when you hear that, you now know it's maybe a little more than just feelings too. And so I think that has helped some to make that more normal in like a different way, because maybe like she started by just saying like, hey, you're allowed to have feelings about this, and now she's like, and you also can like actually have problems because of this, right? Like you might need help because of this, or you might really struggle because of this. And I think it gives you a different lens to look at some of her older stuff through, and also make you feel seen in some capacity where you relate to someone that you've related to for a while, and now that person also struggles and gets help, and that's nice,
Yeah. Having like, again, like our celebrities or our peoples like be human, right, and going through human experiences is what, again, part of this, it feeds into the little bit of that parasocial relationship, because they're going through it, I can go through it too, or I am going through it, and there's that connection that occurs. So, okay.
It's like connection and identity, right? Like, so it's not just like they're going through it, I'm going through it. It's also like, if they're going through it, maybe I'm going through it. Like maybe that's what symptoms look like, or maybe that's what I have been struggling for. Maybe I need a name for it, right? Like I think it also helps on that side, which is like, I can get help because they did, or maybe that is what I'm struggling with because I have all the same things, and maybe I should go talk to someone. And so as much as it might just be the connection part and feeling seen, there's also like it helps more people get help.
Yeah. Britt, have you seen that, or things that like it shows up in any way, shape, or form, like with clients that like they may resonate, or they may bring up something like a song or music or something along those lines, and then it's like, hey, is this potentially depression, anxiety, etc. that's there?
I've had a lot of clients come in with it's not necessarily a super structured thing always, this is what's resonating with me right now. And if you start to, for some people, it's just as I don't want to say basic and like a minimizing way, but for some people, it's just kind of like this is the emotion of the song. This is how I'm feeling. But then for other people, there are points where it's like, oh yeah, this song is like digging into some of the stuff that is making me feel a type of way. And maybe I don't even like fully understand it, but it's making me think that there might be something more there. And I think that is definitely a thing that shows up. And in, thinking about, like Jessi mentioned, the Miss Americana documentary, I feel like things like that are helpful too, in that, like, I think that seeing Taylor talk about XYZ things that she struggles with, it opens the door for somebody else to say, hey, I might be kind of struggling with that too. And I might need some support with that. And maybe the like vehicle to start that conversation is, so I was watching this documentary, which feels a lot less intimidating than just like walking into like a therapist's office and being like, hey, so I think I have an eating disorder, right? Like it's
Right.
like a soft open to be able to be like, so I'm a Swiftie and I was watching Miss Americana and really resonated with this thing that she was talking about. And like, that's an easier opening into a conversation that is a really vulnerable and scary conversation for a lot of people. So I think that music and just in general, like that kind of
media,
the persona of someone can be a really great starting point for that.
Okay. Jessi, anything to add to that part?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I've brought song lyrics into therapy. You know, I mean, if you're sitting at home and like, this is what Instagram, I mean, in some capacity is also good for, which is like a quote or a poem or a thing that someone else did words and feelings better than you. Like sometimes other people do words and feelings better than you. We were not taught how to talk about feelings, and sort of like what Britt was saying about how like it sounds silly. I mean, it's not, and it was hard. Nobody told us how to feel. Most people tell us how not to and why we shouldn't. And so if you're at home and you're listening to a song and some lyric makes you think in some way, you know, bringing that stuff in is quite useful. Like it helps us understand you more. It helps us, like, you know, if those words resonate for you, there's probably a reason. And so like it gives a window that maybe we wouldn't have had otherwise because it resonated with you. And I've definitely done that where I was like, hey, I was listening to this album and for some reason this particular lyric kept like really affecting me and maybe we should talk about that. And it makes a big difference when you have trouble putting words to stuff like, you know, which we all do. And it's not to put blame on someone or to say that like they're doing it wrong and they need other people's help as a crutch, right? It's just to say that like no one taught us how to do that and sometimes other people do it better, right? And by the way, this is Winnie. She's being annoying. So she's on my lap. So if you keep hearing like weird dogs, like she's just trying to completely interrupt this interview. So I apologize. I think it's weekend Winnie is just having a blast.
Well, hey, that's what the weekends are for. So no, it's similar. Like, I mean, again, with any kind of media, right? With movies and stuff like that, songs and stuff too, is like we see them, we visit them in different times of our lives, right? When we watch movies from like our childhood or again, listen to music again from our childhood and like we come at it with that experience with it, like it's a whole different movie, whole different song, and some things we didn't get back then, we get now. So
yeah, I mean, writing is powerful, right? Like writing is super powerful. That's why, you know, I mean, that's why the strike and things like that is important, right? Like they're like writing and the way that actors do what they do is not easy. It's a skill. And writing that way that resonates with people and gets you to feel emotions is a skill. And like it's a skilled work that should be compensated. But also it's just, you know, worth like that medium is important for so many reasons.
Yeah. Britt, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that I think also that it provides an opportunity for self-compassion. Hypothetically, if someone were to struggle with self-compassion, which I'm not saying that I do.
Hypothetically.
But you could, hypothetically, hear a song that feels very resonant with you and notice that you have a much more compassionate response for the person singing the song and the experience that they're singing about, and then realize, oh, hey, wow, so when I'm going through this and I'm beating myself up about it and, you know, minimizing my own whatever and trying to dismiss it, etc., like that's interesting to see that that's not how I respond when I hear Taylor singing about something that seems pretty similar. When I hear her singing about it and I'm just like, oh, yes, girl, like you feel those feelings, like you were wronged. That wasn't your fault. That shouldn't have happened. Like this is, you know, this is a fair reaction, blah, 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 blah. And when I notice how different, again, hypothetically, how different that is to my own reactions to some of my own self, it does point that out in a way that I think is important and helpful for people to kind of potentially offer themselves a little bit more grace and understanding.
Hypothetically. So, I know the recent tour is like, again, it's a huge thing that's going on right now, or it's current event. I know there's like the article kind of referencing it again was like talking about how it's invaded the therapy world and invaded the psychiatry office. Have you guys seen this or not so much? My clientele is a little bit different, but so I don't get it as much, but I'll let you guys go. So Jessi, you can go first, I guess.
I mean, so I think Britt probably has a self-selected population, so she might tell you more, but I think, like not so much, like it's not all the time. I think it comes up more casually for me,
Yeah.
like somebody saying that they're going to the tour or something like that, more than a like excessive conversation around it. It is much more on TV and social and my peer group in ways that wasn't before. Like even the last tour, I had trouble getting someone to take my other ticket to come hang out with me. Like
wow.
that's how ridiculous that the difference is in like a couple years. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I have 2 tickets. I'm going to Taylor Swift. Who's coming with me? And it was like crickets. And they were like, and also the prices were substantially lower. And so, I think, that has changed for sure. But I would say for me in my population, maybe I also see a lot of people who don't want to admit that they're Taylor Swift fans. I don't know. But it's not as prominent in the conversation, my public, like, friend life and things like that for sure.
Yeah. Britt, you get to go now.
Yeah, so I don't know how much of this it feels like a chicken and egg kind of thing. I'm not entirely sure how it happened, but I do have a like substantial percentage of Swifties on my caseload, and so it has been like the tour and the albums and things like that have absolutely been parts of the conversation. Like I feel like I was there to support everybody as they went through the trenches of the Ticketmaster fiasco and the people who got tickets, but it was a whole thing, or the people who didn't get tickets, and then that was a whole thing. And then like leading up to the concert, lots of people talking about what their hopes and expectations were and things like that. And then a debrief after the concert. Like there's, I think there's probably several factors for why that's such a common thing amongst the population that I see. But I do think that it's kind of become, I mean, it's huge now, right? Like, yeah. I feel like even if you are not necessarily talking as overtly about it as maybe I am with some of my clients, like I would be willing to bet that the percentage of your clients who would consider themselves a fan to at least some degree is probably a lot higher than one might think, just because statistically speaking, her fan base is so huge.
Yeah.
Do you ask questions about it, or does it come up?
This comes up. I don't, because I'm less directive, so I don't tend to ask a ton of questions. Though I have, with anytime an album drops, I will usually, although at this point they tend to know that I want to know this, so they just offer it. But I will ask, like, oh yeah, like so, like what song is like really hitting right now? Like with Speak Now, Taylor's version, that was like one of the first things that came up with that handful of clients was, oh yeah, so I'm listening to it, here are my thoughts, and then this is the song that stood out to me the most for these reasons. But for the most part, I tend to just kind of let people talk about what pieces of it resonate for them. Because the thing is even when you're talking about the same exact thing, it's an entirely different conversation, right? For one person, this re-recording that just dropped there, it's these songs that are hitting, and the thing that is impacting them the most is that this was an album that they never really paid too much attention to. It was never their favorite, but now they're seeing it in a whole different light. And then you've got like this person over here who's like, oh my God, I'm reliving a really, really like prominent part of my life by this re-record, and I'm going through some things because I'm reliving this album that came out and now I'm thinking about these things that happened when it came out the first time, and it's more of this like reflective piece. There's just so many different ways that like even the same thing, like an album release, can show up for different people.
Yeah. That works. No, absolutely. Like I think it absolutely plays out different ways, and it comes up. And I think, our own personality, right, from our own bonds that we have, like with our patients, our clients, like, there's stuff that, hopefully we have a good rapport with them and that they know us on some level too, that they bring, or that we bring some of our stuff into there, and then they vice versa comes out too.
Yeah, I asked because I was curious if she created a Swiftie safe space.
A Swiftie safe space,
like,
yeah,
it's almost like they know they can, so they do, or she brings it up in some way that they do. I mean, like, because I do think I probably have more people who are Swifties as patients. Maybe because we got to talk about meds and I'm not deep diving there. That's part of it. But even for me, the reason my therapist knows is I said I was going to the concert and I maybe wore a shirt once or twice that had Taylor Swift on it, right? It's like these like kind of casual things. I wasn't really going to therapy talking about Taylor the whole time, right? But it's like these little things where she would notice and mentioned it, but maybe it's a Swiftie.
I signal it with my cardigan, that's that's kind of a joke, but also not, because I own multiple of them, and I do like not just Taylor cardigans, but I do tend to wear a sweater most days of the week, just because in the winter it's cold. In the summer, I work in an office building, and you know how office buildings are in the summer. The AC is unhinged.
Yeah.
So I'm like also subtly signaling to people where they like come in and they like see, oh, hey, I know that cardigan, which means that like you are probably at least at a certain level of Swiftiness to have the cardigan and be wearing it to work. Like, this is a safe space for me to talk.
Yeah. No, like, my sports fandom has like definitely come through. And then like, like when the 49ers, like, lost in the championship, or they lost the Super Bowl, or they lost all that stuff, like people are like, are you doing okay? Are you doing okay with this? Like, or they'll like rub it in a little bit. So, depending on where the fandom is.
I'm casually signaling that my life is messy by having 2 boots in a year. And so more as my patients being concerned, I'm low functioning. It's like, it's not like, did you go to the Eras tour? Though I just thought about it. I do have at least one patient who did ask me that. It is more like, so this year, is this a thing for you now? Like breaking stuff and like, it's more that for me. I'm glad they talked to you guys about sports and Taylor Swift.
No, and even like, I think with shared experiences too, like there's definitely times like Britt, like I'm sure that when you had people going and you went to the show, and Jessi, same with you, like I remember I went to, again, the Black Party show somewhere recently, and one of my patients was there. And they came up to me and said hello, and, we talked for a little bit, but it was just like, it's that idea of also like, even, we have our own boundaries in the mental health field of like, boundaries, and we can't have relationships, and we can't talk about this stuff. And then how do we deal with seeing you at the grocery store? It's like, these kind of shared experiences come up, but that connects us with them too, to be like, it's nice to know that your therapist is going to the show. It's nice to know that your psychiatrist is like a human being as well, and like going to a show, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that humanizing piece is huge. Like, I feel like even for, even if for clients that, if they like aren't fans of Taylor Swift or whatever, and if they aren't, I'm like struggling to think of a way that this like comes up in conversation, but like,
or how they ended up with you, right?
Right. Like, it's like, if I have a client who doesn't like Taylor Swift but knows that I like Taylor Swift, like even that piece, even though that's not a point of connection per se, I feel like there's connection and humanization in the idea of like, oh yeah, you are just like me, a like regular, a human who really loves your music person, right? Like everybody's got their band, their artist, their whoever. So even if theirs isn't the same as mine, I feel like that's the type of like, there's always the debate around how much self-disclosure is too much and boundaries and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like even if I opened, if I, in my intro speech to clients where I'm giving my 3-second bio, if to every client I included the fact that I'm a Swiftie, I feel like that's a thing that just helps humanize me, right? Even for the people who are like, meh, I could take or leave her music, but I'm glad to know that you're not just like a robot who is nothing more than your job.
You're not ChatGPT who made all these questions for us, right? So
I'm not ChatGPT.
I'm currently plugged in right now, so I have no idea what you're talking about. But I agree with you, though. I mean, I think that we are probably more of this school of thought that that was the wrong thing to teach us, that
Yeah.
like we don't have anything that's human.
Yeah.
I think, people still get mad when I cancel because I'm sick, and I've gotten emails, which I wish I didn't when that happens, right? But I do think that it's important that like that stuff is there and true. Like when I had to not go in person because I broke my other foot, I wasn't going to just be like, I'm no longer in person for the next couple months because it just felt weird. I wanted to tell them. And then obviously it's kind of dramatic because I did just break another foot. And so my office was like, are you sure you want to tell them that? And it was like multiple back and forths. But, to me, very similarly, like sometimes life is complicated and messy. And, I'm a human too. And like this is me coping with it. Maybe it helps you cope with it because I imperfectly cope with it in the same way that like maybe it helps you to know that like sometimes I go to concerts and like sometimes I exist in the world outside of the screen or in person, right? So, if I see people, I kind of operate under the premise that I won't talk to them unless they talk to me and all that kind of stuff. But I also like see people I work with like all the time because I see the employees in the hospital system. And so the way that they react is usually based on the fact that they're like anxious about people knowing that you could possibly know me for any reason besides being my patient. But I think it's important that we say that stuff. And I think it's, sometimes I even think about like in my bio, if you read my bio, it's just, it sounds like I have had no problems, right? It's like, hey, here's all these fancy schools I went to, and here's all the fancy things I do, and yay. Yeah. And I don't know that helps like people in the way that it should. And I have been thinking about that a lot in this like sort of realm of like, what does it mean to be a human in the world doing what we do? And like I think we could do like that better, like, and the way we give talks and the way that we like write our bio, because like, I mean, I did go to a bunch of fancy schools, but like I also am a human and I do like not
you have
just
experiences.
Like it's not perfect.
You have experiences, right? Like you have stuff that you've been through. We've all had stuff that we've been through. Like, again, like I went on paternity leave, like back in December, January, around the turn of the new year. And it was that debate of being like, do I tell people that I'm going on paternity leave? Do I want them to know, right, that I'm having a fourth kid, right? It's not like the same thing as, breaking 2 ankles, but like, having another damn kid, right? Like, so that kind of stuff, but shows up, right? Yeah. All right, so let's wrap up a bit, but we'll start, Britt, anything that you want to kind of parting gifts or things to pass along, or anything that we did not talk about that we should be talking about? I know we could be talking for hours, but...
It was so much fun. This is one of those scenarios where I think to myself, no, I don't have anything. And then like 3 hours from now, I'm like cursing myself because I didn't say the one thing.
The one thing. What is the one thing you have 2 seconds to tell me the one thing? No.
Well, I'm feeling like a lot per se. Just in general, I think that whether we're talking about music in therapy or any other thing, like this is, maybe my soapbox, my cliche broken record line, but I go back to the idea that like, I do think that there is a space and a place for that sort of conversation in therapy and in mental health. Like I know that, I kind of, even in this conversation we kind of joke about me talking about my Swiftiness with my clients and things like that. But like, I think that things like music are hugely important in those spaces. And I think that it's an underutilized resource within mental health and therapeutic spaces because people feel like either there's like intimidation of like, well, I'm not a music therapist, so I don't know, or like it gets dismissed as, well, that's not therapy, you're talking about what songs you're listening to. Like there's just a lot of stuff I feel like that puts distance between those 2 spheres that my continued broken record repeat will be to continue to bring them closer, because I think that it's an important and powerful tool. So
no, I mean, what like we have these things as a common language. Like this is what you're versed in. Like I bring up movie references and sports references like all the time, right? Or other things like that. Cause like, I know that there's that common kind of language, hopefully there with you or with people. So Jessi, any last
I bring up
tips?
common references all the time, but sometimes I date myself with them.
It's okay.
I think they're super common and obviously everyone will know. And then like, I'm wrong. And that happens a lot when I see like college students. They're like, what is that, you boomer?
Do you remember dial-up internet connection? Yeah. Right now.
I mean, even something where it's like a movie that I really think has stood the test of time and it hasn't. But anyway, that's besides the point. I think
with today's college students, you can end up with like multiple degrees of that. Like I made a comment recently to a college student about a mixtape, and then I was like, "Sorry, that's a dated reference." I mean, like if you burn like a mixed CD, and I was like, "Shit, wait, that's a dated reference too." like
yeah, you're like, I'm tired. I'm old. Yeah, I mean, I thinking about this, like if I'm a patient, I want people to know that like bringing in music and bringing in lyrics and bringing in entertainment is valid and helpful, and like you should do that. Like if you're at home and something resonates, like even if your therapist isn't like Britt, who's like actually better trained in this and uses it a lot, most people will learn a lot from that information. So like don't just take that as a random bit of information. If it helps you communicate better, like bring it in. Think of it sort of like when you think about what questions you want to ask ahead of time, or when you think about going into a visit, what you want to talk about, like something like that can be really helpful. And then, if you're a fan, know that there are limits to fandom, and that like it's important to check it sometimes and make sure you have other stuff that you're doing too. And that like if you are going to the Eras tour, awesome, but also know you're going to have some letdown after. So you might want to plan some stuff afterwards, or you might want to make sure you have some things to like commemorate it and think about it more. And so that's important. And then if you're like a therapist or psychiatrist listening, I mean, I think just know that like that you could ask people about the music they listen to, and that can make a difference. I often think if you like looked at someone's Spotify playlist during a particular time, you'd actually be able to diagnose them, like because you'd be like, ooh, someone's sad, right? Like just because you do tend to gravitate towards like the stuff that's resonating with your mood. And so I do think that like if you're sort of stuck with someone as a client, as a patient, depending on what you do, asking them like, what music have you been listening to lately, and trying to get on the same page about that could be a common language that's worth like exploring, and is probably not something you've really had modeled for you, because we model really boring old school stuff usually. And so, just keep in mind that it's like another tool, if especially for these people, like I would say honestly, especially for like college age boys, like these, like sometimes where you're kind of like, you're here, talk to me, like, and it's like one line words, and you're just really trying, and they're there and they want to be there because they wouldn't come otherwise, but they don't know how to talk. And so, finding common, I'm sure you talk about shoes, right? Like it's finding common ground where you can get them talking about something teaches you a lot and makes you connect more, and then maybe you'll talk about that really deep, serious stuff eventually,
Yeah. And it's the thing that whenever I have students, like right now I'm having a bunch of like pediatric residents rotate through me. But like I always tell them, it's those second level questions, right? So when you ask them like, oh, what do you do in your free time? And they say, I listen to music, or I watch TV. Ask the second question, what are you listening to, right? What are you watching? And that gives you the window into like how exactly, like Jessi, like you're saying, is like what they're kind of going through and what they're experiencing. So awesome.
Eventually AI is going to jump in and is going to like connect this. We're going to have Spotify being like, you're going to get a pop-up like, hey, I noticed you listened to This Is Me Trying 8 times in the last hour. Do you need to text your therapist?
And maybe it's not bad, who knows?
For someone to get like...
Yeah, no, we're getting there. We're creeping along there. So who knows? So, all right, both of you guys, thank you guys. How can we reach out to, or how can people who are listening follow along with you if they're not already? So Britt, you can go first, and then Jessi.
I'm not a terribly entertaining social media personality, but
Come on, you are. We enjoy you. That's the only reason you're here. So
The only social media that I use with frequency as far as like public social media is my Twitter, which is at BellaB13. So BELLABEE13. Which, side note, I just would like to say for the record that 13 was my lucky number before I even knew of Taylor Swift's existence. Everybody assumes that I've chosen that as my lucky number because it's her lucky number. No. I chose that lucky number because I was an obstinate, like, fourth grader, I think I was, where somebody in an elevator, I asked why there wasn't a 13th floor, and they were like, oh, 13's an unlucky number. And I just, without thinking, said, well, 13's my lucky number. So
yeah, you tell them.
Was that your AIM screen name too?
I believe was Drama Star 13.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
But yes, the 13 still played prominently there.
I was like, are we getting into AIM scream names now?
It would be the only one. I no longer have AIM.
I was just curious because she said like 13 since fourth grade. So I was like, did you just use the same account?
The same, despite varying levels of cringe throughout the, between AIM and MSN Messenger and MySpace and Tumblr, Xanga, right?
Oh,
like
Tumblr.
we've done the rounds, LiveJournal, right? Like I've had many names in many places, but they always have that 13.
That works. Jessi, your turn.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I sort of made that kind of
top that. You have to
go into weird places. Apologize. I'm at Dr Jessi Goldsbud with an I, like if you took the CA off of Jessica, on every platform, but my primary platform is Twitter. Twitter's complex. Find me on, if you don't like Twitter or you never use Twitter, find me on Instagram, TikTok, or Threads. I am mostly hanging out on Twitter until I get that same amount anywhere else. So feel free to help me get that same amount somewhere else. And, you can always find me on my website, which is just like mine, drjessiggold.com. You can always there's a contact me. There's all my writings there, whatever. It's all there.
Cool. Well, thank you both for your time. And then we will rock on with Taylor.